an important UFO event. Historic, but you probably don't know about it. But we're going to learn more next on the Paranormal Podcast. Welcome to the Paranormal Podcast. I'm Jim Harold. So glad to be with you once again. Now, when it comes to UFOs, we all know Roswell, Rendlesham Forest, and I can name off a litany of UFO cases that those of us who follow this subject are familiar with. But there's one we're going to talk about today that we probably should be familiar with, but many of us aren't. But the gentleman we have today, Seth Breedlove, has looked to change that with his new documentary, Lost Contact. Seth is from Small Town Monsters, and they're the great documentarians who have been super successful and kind of built a movie studio in the middle of Ohio, which I think is incredibly, being an Ohioan, incredibly cool. And I've seen Seth go from just one guy to building out a whole staff, a whole studio, and he's really done a great job. And now he's turning his attention to the UFO question. And we're going to talk about this famous Kentucky case, or maybe not as famous as it should be, Kentucky case. And Seth, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jim.
So I got to ask you this. Why did you decide to go in this direction with UFOs? Because, I mean, Small Town Monsters has done a fantastic job with the cryptid subject. I mean, you've done Bigfoot, you've done everything. Why did you decide, hey, now is the time we want to kind of expand our horizons and look at the UFO question?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we haven't touched UFOs since 2021, I think, that On the Trail of UFOs Night Visitors came out. We've been very focused on cryptids, especially Bigfoot, for the last couple of years. So I know this is a weird project too, because we started filming this in the fall of 2023, which for us is a very extended production timeline. But we wanted to get back into the UFO topic, and I think it was 2023, I started talking to an author named Dewey Edwards, and Dewey was working on a book about the Thomas Mantell event. And I was familiar with the Thomas Mantell event due to that episode of Sightings that covered it. And I've talked about this before, but I love that show, Sightings. And so I was interested just from watching that episode. But when I talked to Dewey had done, a lot of the background research. He was prepping a book he was writing. I think the book's called 12 O'Clock High. And it's about the Thomas Mantell event, but it's very extensive. He goes deep into it. It's a great read for anyone interested. But yeah, that was like my introduction to it was through that Sightings episode. And then what really made me want to cover it was the fact that I did feel like this story was so kind of unsung in the modern ufological circles. If you go on Twitter or whatever, they're talking pretty extensively about congressional hearings and all this kind of stuff, but no one's really talking about the Thomas Mantell event, which is interesting because there's a lot of parallels between this event and what's going on in the modern day, with UFOs. So it was something that I was drawn to simply because I thought it was a story that needed to be told and told as extensively as possible. And there was also the fact that I kind of, during that initial research phase, I became very enamored with Mantell as a person, and a war hero. And I thought his story just deserved to be told, in the way that we do it.
So let's set the stage for people who haven't heard the story. Can you just give us kind of like, if you had to tell the story, the basic outlines of the story to people in like a minute? Who was Thomas Mantell and what happened?
Well, Mantell was a decorated war hero. I mean, that's the short answer. The longer answer is he was also a father and a husband and a Kentuckian. Seems to have been a great man. and someone whose life and death touched a lot of people. I mean, he saved a lot of lives in World War II. So he was a war hero. But what happened, I mean, the short version of the event is that in 1948, January 7th, 1948, Kentucky State Police started receiving reports of a large circular object. And when I say large, some of these reports were saying 250, 300 feet, flying over, it would have been sort of northern Kentucky, Madisonville. And then reports continue to come in across, sort of following this, I think it was a southward trajectory, kind of heading toward Nashville, Bowling Green, that kind of thing. So it starts up near Ohio and then moves south. But this large object is heading southward. The state police call it in to Godman Airfield, which is basically Fort Knox in Kentucky outside of Louisville. And Godman radios a squadron of P-51 Mustangs coming from, I think it was Augusta, Georgia. Is it Augusta? Marietta, Georgia. And Thomas Mantell is the lead in this squadron. They were ferrying these P-51 Mustangs up to Godman Airfield. So Godman radios them and scrambles them to go look into what this object is. So they want to discover, is this something of ours? Is this our tech? Is it a balloon? What is this? So they scramble Mantell and his group of 4 P-51 Mustangs. They go to investigate, catch sight of it. They sort of begin pursuing it, but it's at a higher altitude than what they're equipped to deal with. In fact, Mantell's plane at this time, I believe, isn't even really equipped, with oxygen to go high enough to see this thing. But everyone else in the squadron kind of turns back because they're accelerating toward it at such a rapid rate that they're all starting to have issues with the altitude adjustment. But Mantell keeps chasing it, and Mantell reaches a certain point, blacks out, and crashes to Earth. Is the short way this plays out. And in the years that have followed is where the story really takes some odd turns, because you have a lot of information coming in through shows like Sightings, where they interviewed people who claimed to be in the control tower. You also had the fact that the story, once it becomes well known, which it did at the time, sort of explodes in the public eye. And then there's all these details that start getting added to it that don't make a lot of sense. And I was talking about this with Micah Hanks yesterday, who's a buddy of yours too. But Micah and I were talking about the whole event and how misunderstood it is, especially, oddly enough, especially by Kentuckians, especially young, like younger generation Kentuckians who have this version of the story where Mantell essentially engages in like a dogfight with this UFO, and the UFO shoots him down. Like, there's people that have that sort of recollection of hearing the story, but that in no way really indicates what actually happened. He wasn't shot down. His plane just climbed too high. He lost he lost oxygen, blacked out, and then he would have come. Unfortunately, like, one of the sad parts of the story is at some point, and I believe Dewey's the one that discovered this. At some point when the plane was crashing to Earth, he actually would have
come to
back. Yeah, come to.
Wow.
And attempted to regain control of the plane.
When I saw this and I was looking at it, what case it reminds me of is the Bermuda Triangle Flight 19 case.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there wasn't a UFO per se, but it was this crew of around the same time. And they were on a training exercise, and, there were radio calls and things didn't quite make sense. And, they were all lost. And I don't think any of the wreckage was ever found. And that's exactly what it reminded me of, was at Flight 19. Just something that was said. And this wasn't a rookie pilot. Didn't he have like 2,700 hours of flight or something?
Yeah, he's highly decorated. He flew, what is it, Normandy or D-Day? He flew.
Yeah, Normandy was D-Day. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. He flew this plane that was essentially destroyed. Managed to get it to where it was going, and that ended up being a huge turning point in that particular battle. No, he was highly decorated. There's also, like, one thing that's interesting about the just to go back to this version of the event where he engages in a dogfight with the UFO is that there was an event similar to that had taken place just, I think, a few months prior. So there is the idea that maybe people are kind of like
conflating the two.
Yeah, conflating the two events, because there was an event where a pilot engaged in a supposed dogfight with a UFO. And I think it might have even happened within a few weeks of that event.
And then many years later, I think in Iran, when the Shah was still in power, there was a case where essentially, I think it might have been, because it was an American plane when, Iran was still allied with the United States. And it was like an F-14 or something, or maybe it was, no, an F-4 Phantom, I think it was right, trying to dogfight a UFO, and it didn't work out. An Iranian
another
pilot.
One of those. There's a case like that here in Ohio, and this one's fresh in my mind just because we're working on it for a show. But the Coin helicopter incident, which is also sort of a unsung piece of UFO history, where there was a helicopter flying, I think, from Cleveland, maybe to Kentucky.
I should know this one, and I don't.
Yeah, it was in the 70s, I want to say. But this helicopter was heading from either up from like the Mansfield area or down to the Mansfield area. But I can't remember which direction it was headed. But they're over the cool little piece of like cryptid Easter egg lore connected to it is that they're flying and they sight this like green glowing UFO, and they engage it to the extent that they're basically in a dogfight with it. Like they're chasing it, it's chasing them, they keep losing it, it loses them. And it all takes place over Charles Mill Lake here in Ohio, which is where the Charles Mill Lake monster was roaming around in the 50s. So anytime we drive by that Charles Mill Lake, I always yell out to everybody that they're on hallowed ground. But that Coin helicopter incident is super interesting because in like 2017, I was at an Ohio MUFON conference here in Ohio at like a Quality Inn or something. And I had never heard of this Coin helicopter incident. And the story gets told, and then a man in the crowd stands up and said, I was actually there and witnessed the dogfight happen. And it came to find out that this guy is now like the fire chief of Mansfield or Ashland. It's down in that general area. And he was like a teenager at the time. They were having like a party on a hill, and him and his school buddies saw this, like, and he said there was like 20 people there that witnessed this dogfight happen in the skies over the Charles Mill Lake. But those two stories, I can't remember the other incident that I'm talking about from the 40s that might have been conflated, but the Coin incident and that incident, I think, are two really undersung pieces of UFO lore that involve like a dog fight with a UFO. I hate UAP, honestly.
Well, we're going to get back in a little bit, and we're going to talk more with Seth Breedlove about Lost Contact, this case, and I want to ask him about the different silos in the paranormal, and can't we all just get along? Right after this, We're back on the Paranormal Podcast. Our guest is Seth Breedlove, movie maker extraordinaire when it comes to all things cryptid and UFO and paranormal. And we're talking about his recent work, Lost Contact. Now, Seth, let me ask you this. You know, this is something that kind of drives me nuts. When I started the Paranormal Podcast, to me, the paranormal meant kind of like you talked about sightings or Unsolved Mysteries or In Search of, or all those great old shows, or Coast to Coast AM, where, you know, to me it was cryptids, it was ghosts, it was UFOs, it was anything weird that we really couldn't explain. And then, you know, as the ghost hunting shows have gotten more popular over the years, it's become, oh, you do paranormal, yeah, you do ghost hunting and ghosts. Yeah. And I want to say and I've noticed something weird because like you, I kind of have my hand in different pots. So I know, you know, not nearly as many people as you, but I know a decent amount of people in the cryptid movement, a decent amount of people in the UFO movement, a bunch of ghosty people. And they seem to be very siloed where, you know, and there are exceptions, but for the most part, one doesn't talk to the other. And sometimes the attitude, I think, is, oh, you know, those cryptid people, they're a little weird. Now, we with ghosts, we make all the sense in the world. Or the UFO people say, you know, UFOs, I mean, come on, that makes sense. But these ghost people, do you find any of that? And what do you think about all this stuff being so siloed? Should we look at it more holistically?
I mean, I think it's that people just have different interests, but it is an odd thing because to me, I've always been interested in all of it. I've never kind of just considered myself like a Bigfoot enthusiast or a UFO enthusiast. And my interest in some topics waxes and wanes with time.
Sure.
And so I've never understood it either. I am also not in the camp that I think the phenomena are all directly connected. So I know that's like kind of the hot idea, the hot topic right now is that everything's connected. And there's people connected to STM that think that. So, I mean, it could be that. I do think people are really worried about their quote unquote credibility, especially when it comes to the UFO subject, because I think those people are that subject has become so mainstream in the last like 5 years that they kind of consider them. A lot of those people consider themselves sort of above the kitschy stuff, you know?
Right.
You also have the fact that, like, you know, certain elements of MUFON don't want to deal with humanoid cases because they feel like it undermines the subject, and some of them don't want to deal with alien abduction because of that. You know, I don't know. I think everyone is scrambling at all times to gain the credibility foothold for their particular subject. And I think maybe when, you know, their ideas, when it mingles, it does not do that. It kind of destroys the credibility. But I also don't think we need to worry as much about the credibility as we do. I mean, I think outside of these topics, except maybe UFOs, most people don't take this seriously at all.
I'm right. And like, if you're in the weird, you might as well be all the way in.
Yeah, be all in.
I'm all in. But the thing is, I'm kind of like, I'm probably closer to you than some people in terms of believing it's not connected. But I do think some things seem to be connected. So I don't think like, I mean, you talk about the stuff that Lou Elizondo talked about in his recent book and you know, having paranormal experiences at his home, weird experiences in Skinwalker Ranch, you know, that kind of thing, where there seems to be this hitchhiker effect. So I think it might be sometimes, but I don't think it's all the time. And I tend to be, you know, when it comes to Bigfoot and things, I tend to be a flesh and blood person as opposed to like this interdimensional Bigfoot. But my favorite story, and I think I've told you before, was someone got a hold of my number one time, and I don't know who it was. I have no idea. Maybe it was somebody just fooling around who knew me. They left a message, and they said, "We're out here in the woods, and Bigfoot's out here mining uranium." So I don't know what.
Yeah, he needs it for his spaceship.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, I'm with you. Let's look at it all. let's treat our, and like you, I have more interest. I probably have less interest in cryptids than I have in UFOs, for example.
Yeah, I mean, it gets
yeah,
draining, like looking into the one particular avenue for so long.
yeah,
And I know with, like especially with STM, some of the crew like get to the point where they're like, I don't have anything else to say right now about
right.
Bigfoot. Can I please do something else?
Right. Now, I do find myself, when I'm not doing this,
Hmm.
because I enjoy it. I mean, I couldn't, and I don't think you could do it as long as you have, or I could do as long as I have if you didn't have a sincere interest and a continuing interest. But sometimes you got to walk away and watch a football game or something else, just is the way it is. Now, back to the Mantell case, kind of like out of standard operating procedure. The government and so forth tried to explain this all away. This is a balloon of some type or sunspots or something like that.
Yeah, it's the most frustrating part about the whole thing. And ultimately, I believe is what led to Mantell's death is the amount of secrecy surrounding the case. But they initially, Project Sign initially called this a Venus. He was chasing Venus. Which immediately does a disservice to somebody who lost their lives while thinking they were protecting their country, which is what happened. Mantell did not know if this object was a threat. He didn't know what it was. He chased it, to protect the people on the ground because for all he knew, it's a experimental Russian
craft. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Project Sign comes out and says Venus. I mean, some of the early headlines that surrounded his passing are so insulting to him and his memory that it's astonishing it was printed. There's articles that talk about him almost as if he was just a hillbilly from Kentucky who didn't know that, what he was doing. And all of that is because of the government claiming he was chasing Venus. When you get into the minutia, or not minutia, but when you get into what he was actually chasing, the most obvious probable cause is that he was chasing a skyhook weather balloon, because there was a skyhook weather balloon that was sighted in Nashville the same day. There were sightings of the in fact, there was a trained observer on the ground who called it in and says it was a Dr. Seifert. He reported a pear-shaped balloon with cables and baskets moving southeast in Nashville, Tennessee, right around the same time that Mantell died. But the fact is, no matter what this thing was, especially if it was a skyhook balloon, then the government itself is directly responsible for his passing. Because the entire thing was under so much secrecy, the skyhook balloons especially were under so much secrecy that even the people who needed to know they were there the most, who would be pilots, were not told about it. So it's an odd case because they come out, they say it's Venus, and they've never really fessed up to what it was. Like they probably have more knowledge, than we do, obviously. But they've never officially said one way or the other what it was that he was chasing. But yeah, the initial response was that this pilot from Kentucky must not have known the difference between a UFO and Venus, which, by the way, would not have actually been visible. It would have been a very barely visible speck of light in the sky that day. It was also kind of cloudy, so.
The thing you touched on something there that's a pet peeve for me, because my family's originally from West Virginia. I was born and raised in Ohio, but I'm very familiar with the dumb hillbilly meme, and it really annoys me because some of the smartest people I've ever met are, quote, dumb hillbillies. So let me ask you this. I mean, you've dealt a lot in Appalachia and in areas where people are kind of victim to this kind of perception. And can you talk about your experience? Because I think that's something important to get across.
Well, my family is from Appalachia too, like yours, Appalachia. Sorry.
I always say Appalachia too. So
well, we're from Ohio. This is the hard thing to explain to people because I see we'll post a video. This just happened because we shot a video up in Vermont and the Appalachian mountain range runs right through there. Um, the guy in the episode that we had posted called it Appalachia, and there was 100 comments saying that he didn't know what he was talking about. And it's like, well, there's different people up north are not going to pronounce it the same way. But yeah, my family is from the hills of North Carolina, right outside of Bryson City, so heart of Appalachia, really. And there's been, I some of the weirdest places in the country are in Appalachia, where the most amount of strangeness happens. You got the Chestnut Ridge, that's kind of part of Appalachia. Um, the hills of West Virginia and North Carolina and down into Georgia. There's tons of high strangeness through that area. So those people have a long history with it. And, to the extent that there's stories that come out of the woods of North Carolina, even from my dad's family, that sort of hint at some of the darker things hiding in the woods there. And I think the easiest explanation for that is to say, well, these are hillbillies who don't know the difference between a spook light and a satellite in the sky or whatever, And that has been the case with almost every phenomenon, from ghosts to UFOs to Bigfoot. If you report that, someone's going to say, well, you're just a drunk hillbilly, like a drunken hillbilly.
But to me,
moonshine.
like with cryptids, to me, it's the opposite. These are people, a lot of them, who have spent a lifetime in the woods, hunting, fishing. They know a black bear when they see one. They know a wolf if they see one. Somebody like me, born and raised in the city, I'm stupid. I might not know what I see in the woods, but they know what they see in the woods. So to me, especially when it comes to a cryptid topic, they're some of the most credible people of all.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. They spend more time in outdoors than us up here in Ohio. At least they do than me. My family down there, especially, like they're always outside. So yeah, their awareness of what is around in the forest is I think much greater than mine. The other thing is that like that awareness of the weird things in the woods is so extreme that they don't think much of it. Like Appalachian lore, that stretches back centuries. We're not talking about, the last 20 years where they're talking about UAPs or whatever. They have their own vernacular for what they're experiencing and seeing. And that even comes out in this story, in the Mantell event, because, there were sightings of UFOs in the skies over Kentucky going back to the 1800s, with the airship waves and all that. So,
sure.
You can't outrun it, but where it gets frustrating is cases like this, where you have this decorated war hero who's essentially, called his observational skills are called into question to such a degree that he becomes sort of the butt of a joke for a while. Like there were comic books about this. There was all sorts of stuff covering the Mantell event.
Do you think that was part of an intentional misinformation campaign to make him look bad, to kind of get it off the scent of this?
I mean, I don't know. I can't say that the government purposefully made him look bad, because what happens is once Project Sign, I'll stop saying government. Once Project Sign comes out and says this is he was chasing Venus, then the newspapers get a hold of it and can kind of do their thing. And obviously we've seen in the modern day how that works out, even for UFO witnesses.
Yeah, David Grush, Exhibit A.
Yeah. So this isn't a new phenomenon, and it goes all the way back to this Mantell case and earlier. But there's, I think the brunt of the responsibility for what happened lies on the shoulder of the government again. Just because I think my personal opinion is this was a skyhook balloon that he was chasing, and we were so intent on keeping that a secret that we allowed a father, husband, a decorated war hero to die because he didn't know what was in his own skies.
Yeah, and I think, that's the thing. I don't think it has to be an either-or case with the UFO question in general, because a lot of people, and I interviewed Annie Jacobson about Area 51 when she had that big book out a few years ago about it, and she talked about the SR-71 and the U-2 spy plane and how UFO reports skyrocketed when those were being tested, and I totally buy into that. I mean, some of the things that we see in the skies that appear to be maybe extraterrestrial or something are probably our own military doing experiments. But that doesn't make it mutually exclusive. It could be that accounts for some, and then there is something else, which I believe there is something else. What it is, I don't know. I don't know if it's extraterrestrial. I don't know if it's interdimensional. I don't know if they have bases under the ocean, which Congressman Tim Burchett just hinted at in the last week. I don't know. But to me, I think what the naysayers do is they say, aha, it's a government experiment. It's a military experiment. Therefore, the UFO question is solved. And I'm like, that's a shell game to me. I think in this case, it is totally, totally possible. You're right. You're totally, you know this case and I really don't. And you may be absolutely right, but in no way, and I'm thinking you would agree, in no way does that say all UFO cases have that as an explanation.
I don't even think the Skyhook thing writes off some of the cases, some of the UFO events connected to this case. Like there were sightings of odd stuff in the skies over Kentucky that day that don't necessarily correlate with a Skyhook weather balloon. There were sightings prior to it and still today in that area. In fact, one of the big revelations in the movie, spoiler alert, is that one of the kids who saw the plane come down, so he lived on the property or adjoining property to where the plane actually crashed, watched the plane come down, saw the military come in and clean it up, watched, the reporters come and take their photos, claims that the following day, a UFO showed up in the skies over the field and hovered there. There's a lot of, you can't blanket any of this stuff. And this case is like kind of the perfect example of that.
Well, I think everybody should check it out, and I really appreciated the little note you had, dedication at the beginning for everyone who's served, because I think that's something that not everybody watching or listening is American, but we Americans forget, and kudos to our veterans, the ones who didn't make it, the ones who did make it. We appreciate all of them. Now, we're recording this in late September. It's going to be a few weeks till this is out. When and where can people see Lost Contact?
The distributor has it available on October 7th on Amazon and Vimeo on demand. DVDs and Blu-rays are through the Small Town Monsters storefront, and that's smalltownmonsters.com. Excellent.
What is your hope for this documentary? I think I kind of know from what you've said. But what is your hope? I mean, obviously, anytime somebody puts something out, they want, millions of views and success. But what else do you hope for it? I think I know. What is it?
I just would like people to learn more about Mantell as a person. That was like a big thing for me going into it, was to focus heavily on him as a husband and father, and as a war hero. I know I keep using that term, but he really was. And so all that stuff is in the movie. We started filming this in the fall of 2023, which, if anybody knows STM, that is an extended, that might be the longest we've ever worked on a project, because it didn't finish filming filming and editing until last winter. So that's over a year that we kind of lived with this movie. And in that time, I got to know Mantell, to a degree, or at least feel like I knew him. And I went to his grave. I went to his parents' grave. One of the crazy kind of tragic accidents or weird circumstances surrounding this case is that Franklin is where Mantell's plane crashed. He didn't live there, but he was born there. And that is a really odd thing because it is a tiny town kind of in the middle of nowhere. And he had been born in Franklin, and when his plane crashed, it was in Franklin.
Wow.
And so there's little things like that. I hope that people come away from the movie and understand who he was as a person, and that we do something to preserve the true story behind this case and a true account of the man.
I kind of thought you were going to say something like that. The film is Lost Contact. You can find it in the places that Seth mentioned, of course, smalltownmonsters.com. Always a pleasure. I know you've got many plates spinning, many projects going. We'll look forward to hearing more on all those. And certainly everybody can keep up with those at smalltownmonsters.com. And certainly I hope everybody tunes into Lost Contact. Thanks for taking time today. I know you're super busy.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thank you for tuning in to the Paranormal Podcast. I appreciate it. Make sure that you follow this YouTube channel if you're watching on YouTube. Share it with a friend. That's how we get the word out. We don't have the big marketing budgets, all that good stuff. But what we do have is you. So please do that. And then if you want to support us in a bigger way, you can join us at jimharold.com/plus. jimharold.com/plus. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next time. Stay safe and stay spooky. Bye-bye.